In this video, I'm going to be sharing some strategies on how you as a high achiever can actually become happier. So if you are the type of person, you're maybe in your 30s or your 40s, you're very high achieving, you're focused on your career, but you also have a family, you also have big goals, and you're kind of like searching and you're striving and you're doing all these things, but you're still searching for fulfillment. You're still searching for happiness. You are going to want to watch this whole video because by the end of it, I'm going to give you some strategies on how you can just evaluate your life and make sure that you're doing the right things according to science that are actually going to make you happier. So all of this is based off of this book called Build the Life That You Want, which is written by Arthur Brooks and co-written with Oprah Winfrey. And this all came onto my plate recently when one of my friends, got to give a shout out to Tim McCool, sent me a podcast, the Tim Ferriss podcast, where he interviewed Arthur Brooks. And it's about a 3-hour podcast, but it is one of the top 5 best podcasts I've ever listened to in my entire life. Number one, just because of the camaraderie and just the vibe between Tim and Arthur Brooks, but also just because there's so much value for people like you and me as high achievers on how we can actually become happier according to science. So Arthur Brooks, if you're not familiar with him, he is a professor at Harvard and he teaches courses on happiness, on leadership, and social entrepreneurship. And he's also a columnist at The Atlantic, where he writes a column titled How to Build a Life. And he has written 13 books. This is just one of them, but all of them circle around how to be happier. And there's so many good lessons in this book, and we're not going to be able to cover all of them, but he kind of starts and talks about what is happiness? Because if I were to ask you, what does happiness mean to you? You would probably have a different definition than I would. Some people would describe it as a feeling. Some people describe it as when you're achieving a certain thing. And when they have studied this and asked different people around the world, there are different answers in different cultures. No surprise, in the Western culture, when people are asked to describe happiness, they actually describe excitement and achievement. But if you go into Asia and Eastern culture, happiness is typically described as calm and contentment. And the first problem that most people have with becoming happier is they just don't even know how to define it or really how to measure it. And so that's the first thing that he talks about is in order to become happier, you need to start to define it and start to break it down. And he uses this analogy of a good and healthy dinner. If you were to try and describe what is a good and healthy dinner, do you describe the feeling of being full? Do you describe the actual food itself? Do you describe the people that you're with? Really, one of the most helpful ways is to break it down into the macronutrients of dinner or of food, which comes down to carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And so it's better to break it down into its components in order to define it. And the way that he does that with happiness is they've studied this and they've broken down the macronutrients of happiness. And it really comes down to 3 things. Number 1, it's enjoyment. Number 2, it's satisfaction. And number 3, it's purpose. And so let's take a look at each 3 of these. So enjoyment, if you think about enjoyment, it really comes down to the things that you enjoy, the things that give you pleasure. But there is a difference between enjoyment and pleasure. Pleasure is just pursuing something for the sake of it. But enjoyment is differentiated when you do it in communion and you focus on consciousness. So really what that means in terms of communion is just when you do it as part of a community, when you do it with other people. When you think about one activity that you love doing, if that's going for a run, if that's going for a hike, the thing that actually brings you joy most of the time is when you do it with other people. And then the other part, consciousness, this really comes down to making memories and focusing on the experience and the experience of doing it rather than just doing that activity. So that's the first part, is enjoyment, and really comes down to doing the things that you love with the people that you love and focused on making memories and experiences with them. Now, the second one is satisfaction, which as high achievers, you probably know this one really well. This is the thrill of working for a goal that you have worked for, a goal that's really important to you. And it's when you do something difficult that might even cause you a little bit of pain. And it's not just doing something that is important to you. It's kind of something that you feel like fulfills a part of your purpose. And the thing here about satisfaction is if you don't really suffer for it in pursuit of the goal, it doesn't really bring you satisfaction. So if you take it back to the early days of elementary school or middle school or high school, if you just kind of cheated on a test or you cheated on homework and you got an A or you got a high score, it doesn't really bring you satisfaction. But if you have a presentation and you got nervous about it and you put a bunch of work in, you did a bunch of research, and then you show up and you do a good job, that is actually what gives you satisfaction. This satisfaction can come in the pursuit of work and achievement there. It can come in a creative endeavor. It can come in a physical endeavor. But satisfaction is that thrill of working toward a goal that you worked for, where you kind of struggle, but you still achieve the goal. So that's satisfaction, which you probably know well. And then the third part is purpose. And this is what he says is the most important element of happiness. And really just without purpose, like we're completely lost. Because when we have a sense of meaning and purpose, we can face life with more of that inner calm and happiness and meaning. And so it doesn't necessarily matter what happens if it's aligned with our purpose. That's something that we'll pursue and we'll find a lot of value in. And so when it comes to happiness, or if you think about like, man, like I'm doing all these things, but I'm not happy, it can be really helpful to break down happy into those three components: enjoyment, satisfaction, and purpose. And the other thing I should mention about purpose that he talks about is it's really kind of thinking about how does the work that I'm doing, how does that benefit others or benefit humanity? And so when it comes to you as a high achiever and you're considering, am I happy or why am I unhappy? The thing that I think can be really helpful is to break it down and to evaluate joy, satisfaction, and purpose. And really, if you were to take a look at your life over the past 30 days, over the past 90 days, over the past year, pick a time frame and give yourself a score on a scale of 1 to 10 and think about how well, like, am I doing on those three components? So first, enjoyment, like, to what degree am I doing the things that I love with people that I love and focused on experiences? Give yourself a score, like on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 is you're doing extremely well at that. 1 is you're not doing very well. Satisfaction, like, do I have meaningful goals that I'm pursuing? Am I working hard towards them? Am I overcoming adversity? Scale of 1 to 10. And then purpose. Do I feel like the work that I'm doing is aligned with my purpose? Are the activities that I'm doing aligned with my purpose? If you're doing well, give yourself a 10. If you're not doing well, give yourself a 1. And kind of use that as a self-assessment. Now, my guess is if you're watching this as a high achiever and you're not happy, if you're not fulfilled, my guess is that you're putting a lot of your time and your energy into the satisfaction bucket and less time into the enjoyment and the purpose bucket. And the reason why I know this is likely the case is because that's where I have been for the past couple of years. And I've realized that throwing 100% of myself into my career or throwing 100% of myself into just training for big endurance races, it does bring me satisfaction and striving towards that goal. But that satisfaction, and the thing about satisfaction is that you can't really keep that satisfaction for a long period of time. After you achieve the goal, you're reset down to what your baseline was. Your baseline does increase, but that satisfaction and that striving is important. It's not a bad thing at all. It's just something that you can't keep feeling satisfied if you're not like constantly pursuing those goals. And sometimes as I reflect on my personal life, I have taken so much of my time and energy into that satisfaction bucket that I'm neglecting the things that I enjoy and the people that I enjoy and the activities that I enjoy and experiences. And then a little bit too focused on myself and not as focused on my purpose in helping other people. So that's just kind of like a quick exercise that you can do to evaluate, like, am I actually putting the time and attention into the right buckets that lead to being happier? And after completing this exercise, if you realize that maybe you're putting a little bit too much time into the satisfaction bucket, not into the enjoyment or purpose bucket, the next part of this process is to start to think about, what can I do over the next 30 days to focus my attention across those other two areas and not just on the one bucket. And so that is kind of the main point of today. So as I bring it back to you, really my challenge for you is just to, one, be aware of these three macronutrients, or these three components of being happy and of being happier: enjoyment, satisfaction, and purpose. And I really want to encourage you to actually go through this exercise, rate yourself, and over the past couple of months, and think about, how well am I focusing my attention into enjoyment, satisfaction, and purpose? And then once you have your scores, start to come up with a plan for the next 30, 60, 90 days in those different areas. Because I really believe if you take a look at where you've been and you start to plan for where you want to go, this is going to be an exercise that is going to help you out. So if you found some value in today's video, please like and subscribe. Or if you're listening to the podcast, go ahead and leave a review. And let me know, like, from this, like, what was your biggest takeaway in the comments below. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.